Greetings, I'm Yvonne, staff for Science for the Public, and I welcome you to Contemporary Science Issues and Innovations. There is much interest in space travel and colonizing space today, and our guest discusses the challenges of living in space and the innovations that will enable us to do so. Dr. Ana Diaz Artiles is an assistant professor of aerospace engineering and the director of Bioastronautics and Human Performance Research Lab at the Texas A&M University. She'll also chair the 2021 ISU Human Performance in Space Department, and she'll tell us about that. Dr. Diaz Artiles is an aeronautical engineer, but her focus is bioastronautics, which includes things like artificial gravity, spacesuit design, and the physical effects of living in space. And she's going to explain all of this for us. It is a very great pleasure to welcome Ana Artiles Diaz. Thank you very much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. And I'd like to start off with just asking about this interesting field. This is bioastronautics, sounds very futuristic and comprehensive. What does it cover, please?
Yeah, so actually you did a really good description right now. Bioastronautics, it's a relatively new word, although the field has been there for a long time. And it's this idea of making sure when humans go to space, they need to be functional, they need to be healthy, and they need to have good performance. So that's obviously very important to keep the mission objectives and making sure they are healthy, but also the mission objectives are also accomplished. So it covers a lot of different things, and I don't think we have found a good definition yet about it. What is it? And we actually have some discussions within the fields. Like, let's just try to find a good definition. A couple of sentences, and we were for hours just trying to find a good definition, and I don't think we did. So it's all this idea of keeping people healthy up there.
Yes. Well, on that, there are a number of real hazards for living in space, long-term living in space. What are the general ones, please?
Yeah, so lots of things are going to be different in space, and one of the main differences between space and here on Earth is actually gravity.
Yeah.
So astronauts are not subjected to gravity as we are here. So they don't use their muscles, they don't use their bones. The cardiovascular system redistributed a little bit. So the blood sort of comes up here, and the body thinks, oh, I should get rid of this because I have too much blood. We are seeing some changes in vision as well, and we think it's related to these fluid shifts. Some cognitive changes, sensory motor strategies to move your arms. So all these things are disrupted, and we are trying to understand those things better and trying to find countermeasures to make sure they are able to adapt really quickly to those events.
I understand that the low gravity is, or zero gravity has tremendous effects on the body, and you're going to tell us more about it. And also radiation, I guess, especially farther away from Earth. So are those the two major things? And then you have all of these physical effects from that?
Yeah, radiation is actually one of the main risks these days, or it's categorized, at least in the NASA world, it's on top of all the risks, radiation effects. So when we get out of the atmosphere, we are not protected by the atmosphere. So definitely the radiation is one of the main issues as well, for sure.
Right. So gravity and radiation are the big ones, I guess. But then you've worked on things like the centrifuges, the things that create an artificial gravity. can you tell us something about that? And then we'd like to get into more detail about your work. So you got to get some gravity.
Yeah, so it's one of the approaches. It's if we we don't get the effects of gravity on the body, and this is causing all these physiological changes. Why don't we put gravity back in? It's a reasonable approach, and everyone agrees it's definitely a good idea. However, we haven't done it yet, and for many reasons, we don't have any certification up there. And there are a couple of reasons why. The first one is that we don't really know how to implement it. So we can think about a big rotating spacecraft, or we can think about a small radio centrifuge where you can get in and out like an exercise machine. You go there for a couple of hours and then stop. But then, even if we get that up there, like we don't know what's the right protocol to follow. Should I be 2 hours? Should I be 1 hour? How much gravity do I need? So all these questions, we don't have good answers yet, and that's part of the questions that I'm trying to answer here on the ground. What would be the right way to actually implement artificial gravity in a way that it's useful for many physiological systems, which is another question. Maybe what works for cardiovascular is not going to work for sensory motor or for bone or for muscle.
Yeah.
Um,
And more on that, but I understand, and for you it is routine, but could you, I should have backed up just a little bit there. I meant to ask if like the direct effect of zero gravity on we've had lots of fun with that with the astronauts and the space stations and so on, and they explain how miserable it can get, things that you take for granted like sneezing and other kinds of things. What happens when you have that extremely low or zero gravity, things like swallowing your organs and everything? What happens?
right. So I think the main, I mean, I haven't been in space, but I've been in zero
I
gravity
wondered.
in a parabolic flight. So I can freeze for 20 seconds. So the first thing, from what astronauts mentioned, is really this fluid shift. Typically, when we are standing on Earth, most of our blood is actually located in the lower body, in our legs. But then once you get into space, that fluid redistribute a little bit. So they start feeling like this puffy head, like all the blood is here, with like a really, really bad cold. So headaches and this like really congestion in the upper body. There is that other very immediate effects, which is related to like motion sickness. People get dizzy because we are used to, I move my head and I'm used to feel certain things. And gravity obviously plays a really big role on the things that I'm feeling. Then I'm in a different gravitational environment. I'm not going to feel the same things. I can just starting to get confused, and then one of the ways the body reacts to this is really to get sick and vomit sometimes. So these are
probably
some of the
very
main.
hard to do in space.
Right. So these are the really things that are happening very quickly. Then bone and muscle, since they are floating around, it's like lying on bed for a long time. Your muscles don't get used, so you lose muscle, you lose bone, and that's not a problem as long as you're up there. The problem is when you come back down. And that's the issue.
Yes. So I understand they do lose bone and muscle mass, that a lot of things, apart from the discomfort of not having the gravity to keep your system normal, that there are these other things, and yet people always want to go back. So they come down after a year, they're ready to go back in a minute, but they experience a lot of discomfort from that. But do they recover? Like people who live on the space station for a year, they come back, you see them in the media and they look normal. Does it take a while to recover your muscles?
Right. So I would start by saying we see a lot of individual differences between different people. Some people do really
Ah,
well very quickly. Some people need a little bit more time. It also depends on the system. So in particular, bone is known to be one of the systems that takes a really long time to recover.
ah,
The sensory motor system, for example, people get down and they really have a lot of difficulty just walking straight because they haven't been doing so for so long. But then in a couple of days they seem to be fine and they recover pretty quickly. So we see a lot of differences between different systems, but also between different people. And this is
ah,
what makes this really, really hard, because how do you know who is going to do well? So this kind of predictive idea, I'm going to do a test on you, and I'm going to know if you're going to perform well or not as well. And then
yes,
it goes back to this like personalized medicine that is
yes, I
so
see.
so this is sort of where we want to go, really these personalized countermeasure protocols for people. So you're hitting on the right questions because these are really hard to do, and lots of people are trying to get answers.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, but you're working very directly on this, I understand, but you have terms like bimanual coordination performance and stuff. I'm scratching my head here. Could you could you give us an idea? So you're in there really testing and creating preparations for people and testing them to see how individually, I'd never thought about that, how individuals might really differ in their ability to deal with these conditions. But could you give us some idea of these very exciting things you are working on in the bioastronautics?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to get a couple of projects from NASA, and the one in bimanual coordination actually investigates this idea of trying to understand what gravity is gonna do on your bimanual coordination task. So it's not only about 0G, which is a really interesting point, because we definitely want to know what happens at 0G, but also there is all this question about what happens in partial gravity, so 0.5
Yeah.
G, so 0.75 G, 0.25
Ah,
G. So we would really want to map the entire gravitational spectrum and understand better what gravity does, like big question, like what is
yeah.
gravity doing to me? So this is the main framework of all these projects and other projects that I have in the lab. And in particular, in these projects, we are going into parabolic flights, which is a plane that is able to recreate those partial gravity environments during those
Ah,
20 seconds. So we have 20 seconds multiple times because we do multiple parabolas, but at least we have 20 seconds of partial gravity where we can do certain tasks and trying to understand if performance is going to be degraded, if yes, how much, are we able to recover, to relearn how to do the task in those environments. And in particular, these bimanual coordination tasks are tasks that we will ask people to move your hands following a certain pattern, the two hands at the same time. And these are really relevant tasks for operational environments. You can imagine now in these new spacecrafts that we have, astronauts have to, it's like an iPad, they have to touch the screen to do certain tasks. So they have to move their arms and in a different gravitational environment. And it would be terrible if they hit the wrong button, right?
yes.
Uh, So we will ask them to do certain movements and also provide some force in different patterns that are more or less easy to do, and all that in all these different gravitational environments to try to map what is the effect of gravity on those bimanual coordination tasks.
I see. So you are able to kind of create the tests in advance and put people through this, which is obviously an important thing. And um, you consider two different types of gravity, near Earth gravity and outer. Can you simulate that farther out in space, like everybody wants to go to Mars?
Yeah, so in this specific project, we will be able to do 0G, so zero gravity, and that's basically free falling on a plane.
Ah,
So that's 0G, but also depending on how the pilots do these parabolas, we are also going to be able to do 0.25, 0.50, 0.75, and 1G.
ah,
So we are going to cover all the spectrum. And during all those times, the subjects will be repeating those tasks over and over. And then we can see, in that way, we can see the effects of changing gravity on the performance of the task.
yes. So we're only more familiar with, like, people go up and they to the space station for a year and they get weak and so on, and then they come back and they seem to recover. Okay, but you're able to manipulate the degree of gravity in your tests and then see what the effects are. Do you have to consider over periods of time? So you do this for short periods of time, but is there a difference between the long period of time? As you said, you stay in bed for a week, you feel the loss of muscle. Can you imagine the space station? So is there a difference there between the short-term tests and long-term effect?
Absolutely, and that's a great point. It's just one of the limitations of this specific
Yeah, sure.
testing platform. We are able to do 0G without going to space, because going to space is pretty expensive. So this is a way to create 0G, but we only have 20 seconds. That's the only the drawback. Then we can also create partial gravity, which we can't create partial gravity in any other place.
Yeah.
Unless we really get to Mars or the moon. But yeah, the limitation is that we just have 20 seconds. So that's something definitely we need to take into account in our experimental design.
Yeah.
We cannot answer questions about long-term adaptation or
Yeah.
these kind of things. We can answer the other type of questions, and of course there's always more questions and more questions.
Yes, yes, I understand that. Now, in terms of, like, either space station or a spaceship that could go a longer distance, then would you be able to create these artificial gravity mechanisms to help? And the other one is, can you protect from radiation as well for those longer distance things?
Yeah, so for long distances, again, there are a couple of things that we can do in going back to the artificial gravity idea. We can spin around the entire spacecraft as 2001 Odyssey in Space. That's definitely an engineering challenge. But I think my personal opinion is that we do have the engineering skills to do it.
Ah,
It's a really big, complex project, and then you need a lot of money to it and a lot of launches. You probably need
right.
to send pieces of the station, and it's something that I think we know, we humans, big we humans know how to do. Is just a lot of investment and a lot of money, and unfortunately, that's also part of the equation. Um, so so I mean, there are a lot of concepts out there for that. I'm not sure someone is really thinking about implementing artificial gravity in this kind of space, like future space missions, and things are still on the table. And this is why the research that I am doing and others are doing on artificial gravity, it's important, because we don't have a good answer. Someone is going to tell me, okay, let's do this. How should I rotate my spacecraft? Like how
Yeah.
fast? And then
Yeah.
we don't know what to tell those people.
Ah,
um,
honest answer.
so it's like we need to feed that information to engineers and decision makers and stakeholders to say, hey, we need at least half a G in my spacecraft,
Ah,
because otherwise all these things are going to go wrong. But maybe it's not half a G, maybe it's a little bit more, or maybe it's a little bit less.
ah,
And all these questions, like all these answers, we don't have them yet.
I see. Um, that looks so much easier in science fiction, you know.
I know.
What can I say? So, and so it really is very complicated, and they really don't have all the answers. So, what you're doing here and this field in general is this is really where it's at. This is extremely important, because once you're out there, it's kind of hard to call 911 if something goes wrong. So and there's the question of just the long time to get to Mars or get somewhere else. So we'll just have to see there. But this is most interesting. Do you think that robots would be a very good thing to try before they send the humans, or are people just eager to go?
That's
Will
a
robots be
classical question. Human versus robots. So yeah, I mean, I think robots are great, and definitely we are already sending a lot of robots to Mars,
yeah,
and all these rovers are robots, right? So they are definitely open some doors and open some eyes here to really understand what's the environment over there. Yeah, I think we humans are explorers, and we definitely have this urge to go there. And definitely, robots are great for certain things, but humans are great for other things. And,
yes,
uncertainty, fast decision making,
yeah.
uh, the combination of humans and robots together, it's what I believe is what it should be. We just have to really learn whatever a robot is going to do best, let's just do it with a robot.
Yeah.
And humans is going to be better at these other things, let's just use humans for that.
Yeah,
So
that's an important point, because there are arguments made that they should send robots because they don't take these human risks. But on the other hand, there are limitations, and perhaps those limitations may last a very long time as to the kinds of decisions and questions that robots can manage and stuff. So that's really very interesting. The other thing that I just want to check is I think that you designed spacesuits also, right? And spacesuits look a wee bit different from the way they those first moon landings, where it looked like people were in balloons. But what's involved in developing spacesuits today, please?
yeah, so well, I would say the current spaces also look like balloons. Um, so there has been the current spacesuit that is used in microgravity, or currently in the ISS. That's a spacesuit that was designed specifically for microgravity. So that means floating around. You are not
Uh,
expected to walk around in any planetary surface. So the lower body actually has really, really low mobility. But there is this new spacesuit that NASA is working on, and it's a spacesuit that will go to the moon. And that spacesuit is still a gas pressurized spacesuit, so it's still with gas inside, but it has a little bit more lower mobility, so people can walk around a little better. So I'm sure this one is gonna work way better than the one that we already have. The work that I'm doing on the spacesuits is actually also a NASA grant coming from a program that is called NIAC program, and it's about really far, crazy up to a certain extent,
The fun stuff.
sort of disruptive technologies that are not going to be ready tomorrow. It's really like long-term crazy concepts. So what we propose is this spacesuit that it's also gas pressurized. So we built on technology that already exists, but also has an internal soft exoskeleton. So that helps with mobility. That helps you move inside better. So it's like an exoskeleton, but soft. So that is way more comfortable for the human. Then on the outside, you have a self-healing skin. So in case you have a puncture, it self-heal on its own, and also has sensors on the outside that helps you interact better with the environment, and also monitor your skin in case it's going to erupt. The sensor is going to tell you, and these kind of things. So we're having fun with that, and it's just a super fun project to work on. Again, very futuristic. This is in collaboration with a colleague in Cornell University. His name is Rob Shepard. So he's the one doing the developing the soft robotic technology and all the tech that will go into a spacesuit, and we have the expertise on the spacesuit technology.
You show that this is extremely complex. You have to think of the design of the spaceship. You have to think about the internal environment in that spaceship or space station, and then all of the stuff that makes the astronauts actually able to live in this kind of a rarefied environment. So this is very detailed work. In fact, it's got to be fascinating too. But then do you think it will be very long before we make these extended trips, or will we just go to the moon and hang out for a while?
I mean, who knows, right? It's with the new private companies. I think this is changing the environment so quickly. And we have seen with the SpaceX how fast they came out with like reusable rockets, which a few years ago was something incredible. And we never, I mean, probably people thought about it, but this company just decided to go for it. And that is helping a lot, accelerating the pace of
that's interesting.
Technology development. And even the SpaceX, they are saying that they should be able to send people to Mars in the next few years, which is something that NASA is not saying. Oh, NASA is taking a more conservative time frame. So I think this is fantastic. This is great because it's pushing the boundary forward. I hope I can see it in my timeline. So I'm optimistic.
I just brought that up because according to Elon Musk, we're on our way at any moment here.
Exactly. So, yeah, and when he says something, he has this tendency to actually do
it. So hang in there for a while. I would like to just shift to, you're going to be chairing this International Space University department in the coming summer. What is that and what do they do? It sounds very interesting.
Oh, this is the International Space University, and this is something fantastic. It changed my professional life when I participated as a participant, and that was back in 2010. And this is where I actually discovered these bioastronautics fields, and I sort of started going in that direction. So this university has multiple programs, but the STAR program that they have is the summer program, that it's about 9 weeks for space professionals. and it's sort of like a space camp for adults.
Mhm.
So it's all about space, and the idea is really to get you a multidisciplinary vision of what space is. So, for example, we get engineers. So that at the time, I was just a traditional engineer. Lots of mecha fluids, thermodynamics, and I didn't know about anything else. But
Mm.
I went to this program, and I started to talk about space law, bioastronautics, space science, telescopes, ethics, all these other fields, all related to
Yeah,
space. But it really broadened my mind about, oh, this is, art, all these things that are involved in space. So it was so open-minded for me that I really liked it, and I wanted to come back to the program. And during all these years, I've been coming back in multiple capacities as a teaching assistant and then as a lecturer. And now this is the second time I'm coming back as the chair of the
I
Human
see.
Performance in Space Department. So my contribution will be during 3 weeks, 3 weeks of those 9 weeks. I'll be in the program doing activities in the human performance domain, typically to people who haven't heard about this before. So we talk about spacesuits and fluid shifts and
Mhm, mhm.
changes in the brain, and we
Yeah,
need to come up with a bunch of activities, fun activities, for really professional, at least for adults, and we can all learn a lot from each other because these people are working in their fields and they are experts in their fields. So every time I go back, even if I am the chair, I also learn a lot about other aspects and from the participants and other people
yeah.
there. So
Well, it sounds like an example of many fields in science now where you continue learning all your life, all your career. So I thought what an interesting concept it is that they would have an international space university for professionals and that you can even change your focus as a result of the stimulation from that field. And then speaking of that, since this is a fascinating area, I think there will be a lot of interest among young people to get into this field in the future. How did you get into this field in general, and then what do bioastronautics engineers need to think about getting training?
yeah, this is a great time to get into bioastronautics.
Mm,
I think on my time, they were limited options.
mm,
Um, and as I mentioned, ICU was a big part of it. And I was also at the time that I was looking for PhDs, and it's sort of like, okay, yes, I just want to go and do this. And they were just really 2 or 3 options out there, to go to universities that were looking at these kind of problems, especially from the engineering perspective. Because I'm still an engineer. I am not an MD, and
mm,
so there
mm.
are other ways to get into bioastronautics, more from the MD side or biology side. People studying cells responses and these kind of
Yes.
things. So in my case, it's more about the engineering side of things. So so I was lucky to get into one of these programs, which was at MIT, and still MIT is a really strong place to go.
Mm.
Texas A&M, we are starting to have a lot of faculty interested in this, and this is why I was also hired at Texas A&M. So TAMU is definitely another place to go. There are now multiple places to go. CU Boulder, it's another university that people are very interested. And I'm seeing you mentioned lots of young people interested, and it's true. And now we are going to enter in recruiting season for students for next year, to do grad school, and I'm seeing like a lot more emails than other
Yes.
years.
Yeah, I
Um,
imagine you would in the future. It's just such an exciting thing and a kind of given that we will be going into space. We'll be long term in space. So how do you get yourself prepared for a career in that? especially when you've pointed out that you really have a complicated agenda. You know, you need to know a lot of stuff, or the teams need to put together a bunch of specialities. But so would you cheer these young people on then? You would say, get out there and
Absolutely, and there's so many opportunities, not only
yeah,
in government, because at the time, NASA or the space agency of your own country was the only place to go. But now all these companies out there, all these research labs, really, like, you don't need to be in academia to do this. People want to go to industry. Lots of companies hiring. NASA definitely, going back to the moon, and lots of resources needed there. So super exciting time, all this human system integration idea, like keep in mind there is a human in there. It's not only
yeah,
about the machine. So all these engineers really need to keep in mind the human and learn a little bit about what the human needs are. If someone is going to be uncomfortable for 10 hours in a teeny tiny spacecraft,
yes.
that person is not going to be functional, it's not going to be, it's not going to perform well. So these are things that engineers need to know
Yes.
if you want to work on these fields, making sure you keep the human in mind.
Right. That's really very interesting that you've put these two things together, because I guess all these years we've never thought about that. And you only think about the claustrophobia in those spaceships. But there's a lot more to it, as you pointed out. And so I think we'll be hearing from you in the future there. You'll be really talking about this. I think I saw on your website that, in fact, that you're going to be doing a local TV, something like Nova in your area. I don't know if it was a public television uh, uh, sort of documentary on the stuff that you are doing. So you'll be getting this information out there. I thank you so much for this wonderful a chance to talk with you. And I think your field is so exciting. And best of luck. And we're very pleased that you joined us today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was fun too. Always fun to talk about these things.
Oh, I think. Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye.